Good morning. Breaking news. Stephen Hayes, the defendant in the Cheshire home invasion, has been sentenced to death. We interrupt your regularly scheduled program. We wanted to bring you this breaking news. The jury is still deciding right now. They've decided, and we're getting the counts as they come in. But we wanted to bring you this breaking news right now. We have Andrew Julian here as well with us.
What are we learning, Andrew?
Well, what we've heard is that on the first count of 6 that the jury is going to be deciding on, they have voted to convict Stephen Hayes to death. We are still waiting on the other 5 verdicts. There are 6 total capital counts. They have to go through each one. It's a long process weighing aggravating and mitigating factors, but they found for death on one count, which pretty much is all you need. I mean, one death count is a death count.
So he was convicted on 16 of 17 counts in the Cheshire home invasion, and as you were saying, of those 6 are capital felonies, which do carry the death penalty. So far right now, we just know one.
We just know one. We're actually waiting to hear from our reporters in the courtroom on the other 5. What happened was the jury announced they had a verdict. They came into the courtroom, they stood up, they turned in these very long forms. Each jury form is 7 or 8 pages where they have to go through a complex series of questions about why they found what they did, and they've just read the first one. We're waiting now to hear about the other 5.
I'll give you what the 6 counts are. Some are similar. For example, one is murder of a person under 16. That would be Michaela Petit. That would be one of the 6 counts. The other one is murder of 2 or more persons. A third one is murder of kidnapped persons. That would be Jennifer Hawke-Petit. Fourth one would be murder of kidnapped persons, Hayley Petit. And then the final 2, murder of kidnapped person, Michaela Petit. And then finally, murder of sexually assaulted person, Jennifer Hawke-Petit. So they're murder and kidnapping charges. Those are the 6 that the jury are really focusing on to see if he will be given the death penalty. We already know he has been given the death penalty in at least one of these. I would imagine that they're probably going to come back with death on all of the 6, but we'll soon find out.
And they were deliberating all weekend, and the reason we're bringing it to you this way is because cameras are not allowed in the courtroom for the reading of the jury's decision, but we do have reporters inside, outside the courtroom that have been covering it since the very beginning, and so they are sending us messages as soon as each verdict comes down, and we know one is death so far in these 6 capital felonies.
It took about 4.5 hours over a 2-day period for them to reach the 16 guilty verdicts on the 17 counts, and one might wonder, why does it take so long to decide if he should be put to death or not? It's not as though there was a whole lot of additional information given in the penalty phase. But when you look at these forms, you realize that they have to go through each form in kind of a painstaking process, answering individual questions as to whether there are mitigating circumstances or aggravating circumstances. The jury weighs these to determine whether they were going to give the death penalty. So that's why it took, I would imagine, at least 3 days.
Yeah, I mean, the state has made it very complicated and hard to give someone a death sentence. It's not meant to be taken lightly, and they have to go through. We're just getting some word in on another count. Okay, he has been. Looks like we have a death count on the second count, killing a child under the age of 16. This is for Michaela.
Okay, so we have 6 counts. We found out 2 are death. Right now, let's send it out to our reporter, George Colley. He's live outside the courtroom. He's been following this since the very beginning. George, what are you learning?
Sarah, yes, I'm learning right along with you. So far, 2 counts, 2 death sentences for Stephen Hayes. It all started inside the courtroom, a knock from inside the jury deliberation room. Reporters, supporters, family members of the Petits and the Hawks were inside and outside the courtroom. They all scrambled inside. In the past, when there had been a question coming from the jury, Judge Blue would enter into the courtroom and would say, it's a question, we're going to be bringing all the attorneys back in, we'll be bringing the jury in, we'll answer the question. There was a very serious tone on the judge's face. There was a hushed silence inside, and as you just heard from the tweets inside, so far the first 2 counts, the first 2 capital felony counts, Stephen Hayes has been sentenced to death. Sarah?
George, what's the atmosphere outside of the courtroom where you are? Obviously, you're not inside and listening as they continue through with the counts, but what does it look like outside there with you?
Well, outside, you are seeing the media frenzy outside here, and as soon as things started to get a little bit hectic, you start to see some of the reporters running out of the courtroom, other producers from some of the other stations running in. It has been a media, I don't want to say circus, it really hasn't been a media circus here. The marshals and the people here in New Haven have done a very good job in controlling it. But as you can imagine, it has been almost 2 months, a full 7 weeks that this trial has been going on, that the trial went on, and the penalty phase. As many of you may remember from when the verdicts came out, there were reporters 3-4 deep for when Dr. Petit came out to have his press conference. Obviously 4 days of deliberations, people coming here at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to get in line to make sure they can get a seat. So it's been very hectic today. There's been a more serious tone today compared to the weekend deliberations where I think people felt from the juror questions that they weren't quite ready yet to make a verdict. Obviously today, just about an hour and 15 minutes in, the jury made their decision.
George, you know, the death penalty has brought up a lot right now, a lot of controversy, people saying, should he get the death penalty, should he get life in prison? You've covered this since the very beginning. What have you heard from the Petit family and from other people inside the courtroom?
Well, the Petit family from the very beginning has come out very strongly in support of the death penalty for this case. You know, obviously a lot of the reporters, they're not giving an opinion one way or the other on it, but what you found is, and maybe part of it was just the shock of this case. I mean, this was a case when it happened that in the suburbs here in Connecticut, it forced people to check that their doors were locked once or twice before they went to bed to make sure their windows were locked. So the way that the communities came together following this, by the time the trial came over 3 years later, people were ready to have this case get to court. What I think you found from folks, and whether it was from following it on Twitter with the details almost minute by minute, you found a lot of people coming in, and they all had an opinion. You know, I'm not really going to share them, but as you can imagine, many of the Petit supporters, I could probably say, were in favor of the death penalty. But, you know, Judge Blue, when he read the charge the other day, had told the jurors, you know, you and you alone have the sole responsibility of making a decision whether Stephen Hayes, a fellow human being, lives or dies. And no matter where people stand on that, when those words were said inside the courtroom, the seriousness of this decision that the jury had to make became very clear. And, you know, let me tell you, this could not have been an easy decision for that jury.
We're also getting word from inside the courtroom, our reporters there, that there has now been a death sentence for the third count, which is murder of kidnapped person Michaela Petit. So now we're up to 3 death sentences, and we're talking to Andrew a little bit about that. So we're up to 3. We've got 3 more to go as far as the capital felony counts, but it just appears as though that's the way the jury's going.
Yeah, it certainly does, and in some ways it's almost a moot point at this point. Of the 6 counts, you need 1 death count to get a death penalty, unless there's some sort of challenge to that count. We're getting the 3rd one, and it's moving fairly quickly. They had said it might take longer, so we're moving fairly quickly through these forms. I imagine after it's all done, they may do an additional poll of the jury. The defense may request that.
Yeah, both sides can ask for that, and,
yes.
And it has to be a unanimous decision on each of these counts. So,
yes. Yeah, and clearly the jury was working hard over the last few days. We know both Saturday and Sunday they had indicated they wanted to work through the lunch hour. Eventually they ended up taking some time and eating something, but certainly that pointed to people that they were close to making some very critical decisions. And as we talked about, these are very lengthy forms, and if you find any one of what's called a statutory mitigating factor, such as you're not cognizant of what you're doing, you're mentally incapacitated in some way, that can immediately end the process toward a death penalty. So we know from their earlier notes that they were asking a lot of questions about those factors and how to weigh those factors.
Now, this has obviously brought up a lot about the death penalty. We even had some people on our show talking about how long will Stephen Hayes sit on death row, what will happen to him. What are your thoughts on this, Andrew?
Well, we know that to actually carry out a death sentence is a very long and arduous process in Connecticut, and we can expect years and years and years of appeals and challenges around this issue. The last person to be put to death in Connecticut was Michael Ross, but he wanted to die, and that expedited the process. You know, absent someone saying, I want to die, and Stephen Hayes has in the past said, I want to die,
right?
So we don't know what he's going to do. It could be a decade, it could be 2 decades before we actually get to an actual execution of this sentence.
We're looking at the death chamber there. He'll die by lethal injection. That's the way they do it here in Connecticut when somebody is sentenced to death, at least from this time forward. So that's what you're looking at that video. And talk about some of the mitigating circumstances. There didn't seem to be a lot of compelling mitigating circumstances in this case. They talked a little bit about perhaps alcoholism or that he was abused as a child, but it didn't seem as bad as I have heard in other cases where you almost feel sorry for an individual who's on trial.
Well, there are two kinds of mitigating circumstances. There's the family upbringing and substance abuse and the fact that he was brought up in an abusive home. Those are called non-statutory mitigating factors. The statutory mitigating is like he didn't know what was going on. He wasn't cognizant. And the defense kept pointing toward the idea that Stephen Hayes was led down this road by Josh Komisarjevsky, that Komisarjevsky was the ringleader and Hayes was just sort of this unwitting guy who got swept up in the panic or the emotion of the moment, as it were, on that day in Cheshire. But clearly, at least through the counts we've seen so far, the jury was not persuaded by those arguments, and they have convicted Stephen Hayes to death.
The two were in the house for quite a long time. I mean, they broke in around 3 o'clock in the morning, and then we all remember the video of them going to the bank with Jennifer Hawke-Petit at about 9 o'clock. So so the argument was there was plenty of time to stop what they were doing and just get out of the house. And the fact that they were there for so long and just the horrific nature of the crime, the rapes, the kidnapping, the murder, the fire, just indicates that there really weren't too many mitigating circumstances.
And with this happening to Stephen Hayes, Joshua Komisarjevsky, he's going to go to trial next year. And do you think this is almost foreshadowing what's going to happen to him?
Yes, I do. Right.
Well, it's going to be an interesting case to see how it develops, how the defense tries to play this one out. I mean, they certainly could make an argument now that so much of what happened that day in Cheshire has been out in the public arena, has been discussed in great detail, that pictures of the crime scene have been posted on websites across the state, and this is a crime of a truly horrific nature that, as George told us, has really gripped people and gotten hold of their attention. You certainly might be able to make the argument, and I wouldn't be surprised